Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to this week's video. Today we're going to be going over my top 5 deadlift tips. These are going to be the top 5 tips that I suggest to people when they ask me how they can improve their deadlift. You may disagree with some of them. Some of them are kind of hotter takes that a lot of people probably wouldn't agree with, but these are just some of the things that I've seen and some of the things that my coaches have seen in people who are trying to grow their deadlift. So I hope you enjoy the list. If you have any tips that I didn't cover, feel free to drop those down below in the comments. Before we get started, I just want to say thank you to everyone on the positive feedback I've been getting on my previous squat and bench top 5 tips videos. Those have been getting some good traction, and I've just loved seeing the comments down below there on what people think of my top 5 tips, because it may not match what they think, or if one of the tips that I gave them have helped them grow their squat or bench. So feel free to keep that conversation going in this video. And also, this video is going to be kind of conventional deadlift focused. Not to say there's not going to be tips that apply for both sumo and conventional. So if you have additional sumo tips, feel free to drop those down below, because someone may have not heard those tips or heard those suggestions. So this video is going to be covering mostly conventional. There's going to be some hints of sumo in there, as you'll see. So thanks for tuning in to this week's video. Let's get started. Now, number 5 on my list is going to be trying to pull hook grip. A lot of people really don't like pulling hook grip. They try it once, they say, ow, that really hurts. I don't like to do it. I have just been such a huge fan of hook grip ever since about a year and a half ago. I tried to convert from conventional to sumo, and I tried pulling mixed grip, and I always felt like one arm was going out, and I tried to pack my lats more to keep the bar closer, and the same problem kept happening, and I just didn't like where I was. So I just was like, you know what, I'm really far out from competition, let's try pulling hook grip. And ever since then, I have not looked back on hook grip. There are 2 main benefits that I think that you can get from hook grip. Number 1 is going to be that you don't have the grip, almost is never a limiting factor on hook grip when you're pulling for singles. When you're doing volume, you can kind of lose the grip sometimes, but when you're pulling for singles, it's really all about just the strength you feel in a couple of fingers, and you can just feel the bar and the weight. And almost the heavier the weight gets, the easier it is to grip. I don't know if it's just the way it is for me, but it just feels so tight in my hand, and I love the way it feels. And number 2, you eliminate like 2 inches of range of motion. I get a pull, say you're say up there is the bar. I get a pull from right here instead of pulling from right here. See the difference? I just love the way that hook grip feels. I have almost never had any grip issues in the past year and a half after I've switched from mixed grip to hook grip. For some people, it's just not for them, and I get it, but at least give it a try for an entire block. Don't try it once and say, ow, that hurts, I'm not going to try it again, because honestly, it stopped hurting for me after like 3 or 4 weeks of doing it. You get a callus there just like you would for pulling normal deadlifts, and it just feels fine. Now on back offs, you can still do mixed grip if your hook is failing, but for top sets, I just cannot suggest enough converting to hook grip. Some people aren't about it. I'm all about it. I really suggest it. Number 4 on the list is setting up consistently. Setting up consistently goes such a long way in helping you grow your 1 rep max in those lifts. Hitting all that same volume and all that weight the same way every single time, just like I said for squat and bench tips, setting up the same way every single time just makes those singles so much easier and so much more consistent and so much more predictable. You know, if you're changing your setup every other day, you go into pull, you're not going to know if it's the setup that did something wrong, or if it's your programming or your coaching or other cues. Setting up consistently gives you that baseline. It is no longer a dependent variable. You can measure everything else on your deadlift training with accordance of that's going to be the same every single time. You don't have to worry about it. If you're going to make tweaks, do it after the block you're in or after the cycle you're in. Don't do it in the middle of a block when there are other variables at hand. Make it a note. I want to switch it up when I do my next block and see how it feels. But within the block or within the cycle or within the prep, do not change it unless it is absolutely crucial or you're starting to feel too much fatigue from doing it one way or injured one way, I would highly suggest trying to stick with one setup, whether it's sumo or conventional, and stick with it throughout the whole prep and do each rep and setup the same way each and every single time. Now, number 3 on the list, this one's kind of personal to me, but this is narrowing your conventional deadlift foot width. So a lot of people who get into powerlifting come and they see these videos of strongman deadlifting with a super wide super wide deadlift and have their hands outside of like an Eddie Hall deadlift. I don't know if anyone has seen Eddie Hall. I'm sure a lot of people have, because a lot of people deadlift this way with their knees outside of where their hips are set up, and they aren't pulling sumo because their hands are on the outside. But it just is not a highly advantageous position to be in, to have your knees outside your hips but not rotate your feet at all. Being stacked up vertical, right where you're right on top of every single next lever in your body. So you go from your shins to your thighs to your hips to your erectors, is all stacked vertically, allows you to produce so much more force in the same direction instead of having to deal with everything going all sorts of directions like a lot of people do when they deadlift. I used to pull the exact same way. I can put a clip up from my first competition. It was not pretty. My feet are so wide. I am just like brute strengthening the bar up like a strongman deadlift. I just cannot suggest moving your feet. Just move in your feet like a foot width or a foot width and a half, and just stay stacked right on top of your hips has been such a crucial fix in my technique. And it honestly stemmed from one day I was doing RDLs with the narrow stance, and I was like, dang, this feels pretty good. And then my next block, I incorporated that narrower stance into pulling conventional, and it just felt so much better. Allowed me to stay stacked and load my hamstrings and glutes and take a little bit of the fatigue out of my back. So I just cannot suggest narrowing your conventional deadlift, your feet width just a little bit, and see how it feels in your next block, because it could be a huge game changer for you. Now, number 2 on the list, this is probably the most controversial tip that I'm going to give today, is incorporate both sumo and conventional into your training.
Capital B, capital O, capital A, capital F, both.
Especially if you're far out from competition. When you get closer to competition, you want to focus on that one lift. But say you're more than 12 to 16 weeks out from competition, I would highly suggest for a block or two incorporating both conventional and sumo in at the same time. Some people think there's not a lot of carryover, and I couldn't disagree more. Feeling the wedge, if you're sumo deadlifting correctly, feeling a wedge and really feeling how your body's getting loaded and how tight your lats are and all the things you have to do to hit a correct sumo deadlift are a lot of the same things you're going to be doing on a conventional deadlift. At least for me, I really enjoyed the way that I can incorporate that same wedge, so that same feeling that bar is just coming off the floor just like you want it to in a sumo deadlift. It's coming off the floor super easy, but incorporating that feeling, or the way I feel while doing that, and trying to emulate that feeling during my conventional deadlift has been so beneficial for me, especially with the weight coming right off the floor. It allows me to load my hips and load my hamstrings and glutes just so much more than I was before. That tip, along with the previous tip of narrowing my stance, has just been crucial in enabling me to pull significant amount more in the previous year than I thought was even possible. Deadlift, I used to be able to squat more than I can deadlift, and now my deadlift is way stronger. And I think a lot of it has to do with going and focusing on sumo deadlift for a couple blocks and then going back to conventional. It just had so much carryover. A lot of people don't think it does, but I just cannot disagree more. At least for me, I know N equals 1. This is anecdotal, but if you are a conventional puller, go try sumo for a little bit. You don't have to convert exclusively, but going over and pulling some sumo cannot hurt. Even if it's for a block or two and you don't get any benefit for you specifically, at least you could say that you tried sumo and it just wasn't for you. But maybe you try sumo and it becomes your new it just blows up your total, because now you can pull a lot more. If you've pulled conventional all your life, I would highly suggest pulling sumo, and that goes the same thing if you're pulling sumo try to incorporate some conventional because there's going to be some carryover, especially the further you are from competition. You need a little less specificity. Trying out new lifts can grow your main lift a lot more when you go back, or you can just convert if that other lift is that much stronger than your normal lift. Now, number one on the list is specific to me. I suggest it to a lot of people who are having issues with erector volume, but that is lowering deadlift volume. You got to remember, in this sport, you're doing a squat, bench, and a deadlift. You have to realize that you're not just deadlifting for top. You have to incorporate these other fatigues into your deadlift training. So loading up your deadlift volume, and if you're hitting a low bar squat, a lot of that volume is going to carry over. So hitting a ton of deadlift volume could inhibit your ability to grow your low bar squat, especially if you lift low bar. And I have just really enjoyed training with hitting a top set of deadlift. So I go hit a top set of 1 to 5, and then just going and doing RDLs, back offs, or just go hitting accessories that aren't going to fatigue me as much for the next time I squat or deadlift, but really help me still grow in the skill acquisition. It's not going to be as specific as doing a bunch of volume deadlifts. That's what you have the top set for. That's when you're going to feel that load the most, and where you're going to get the most skill acquisition, because that's going to be closest to what you're going to hit in comp. After you're hitting your top set and doing back offs for deadlifts, you're going to have a lot less carryover in the skill department, but you can still load up those muscles by doing RDLs or other accessories in order to help grow those muscles and help grow your engine going forward. So you're still getting those subsidiary benefits. Not as much skill acquisition from hitting an RDL or another accessory, but I just cannot suggest, if you're having some issues with fatigue in your hamstrings or glutes or erectors, and your programming's fine, maybe you have a coach, and the volume is fine on those things, and keep deadlifting. But if you're having issues, I would suggest maybe maybe I should just hit a top set of deadlifts and then go to accessories if I if I want to load a different part of my deadlift, or I have a weakness in a different part of my deadlift. But what I have in training right now is a cluster set. So I have 2 days of deadlift. One day is a cluster set with some back off. So I have essentially a 2x2 at a top weight, and then a 4x2 back off. And then the other day I have like a heavy deadlift, and then I have RDL back off. So I still get that skill acquisition on both days, but I don't have to load up my erectors, which are my limiting factor in my deadlift, as much as if I was trying to get all that same amount of volume from strictly conventional deadlifting. Thanks for tuning in to this week's video, guys. These were my top 5 tips for the conventional deadlift. I've really liked the feedback I've been getting in the other videos, so feel free to drop your tips down below, or your thoughts on my tips. Some of these were kind of hot tips that I've seen people disagree with before. But if you have any additional feedback to give, feel free to give that down below. Make sure to hit subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.